Why should Social Security recipients vote for Ron Paul? Hello, this is your fellow Ron Paul supporter, talking specifically to you, the Social Security recipients. You are real human beings. You are our fathers and mothers, aunts and uncles, grandfathers and grandmothers. You indeed are not a line item on a balance sheet, or a pushover, like this gentleman is saying.
I'm not a number. I'm not a line item on a budget. And I'm definitely not a pushover. But I am a voter. So Washington, before you even think about cutting my Medicare and Social Security benefits, here's a number you should remember: 50 million. We are 50 million seniors who earned our benefits. And you will be hearing from us today and on Election Day.
The problem, however, in case you don't know it, is that your Social Security benefits have already been cut. You have not received a cost of living allowance in your benefits for the last 3 years. So for the last 3 years, your benefits have stayed the same, while your living expenses have all gone up. At least now, you are getting a small increase.
Evening. The official word from the government won't come until tomorrow, but we can tell you tonight that if you are one of the 55 million Americans on Social Security, you will be getting a raise in January.
Of course, you're not getting that much, only about $450 a year or $38 a month.
Wyatt Andrews tells us how much of a raise they'll be getting. Wyatt?
Scott, this is an average, but the Social Security raise we expect to be announced for next January will be around $38 a month. Social Security is expected to announce a COLA, a cost of living adjustment of around 3.5%. It's the first increase since 2009. Seniors receiving the average benefit of $1,082 a month would receive an extra $3,784.
And I know, as I'm sure you know, that the cost of living, whether it's healthcare expenses, food costs, or heating expenses, has gone up more than a measly $38 a month. Of course, I'm not saying that $38 a month is nothing. Every little bit helps. But there is a deeper and more fundamental question to be asked regarding Social Security. Where is the supposed $2.7 trillion trust fund that you have allegedly been paying into for the last 40 years? If you had been making all of your Social Security payments for the last 45 years or so, then why is Social Security in the chaotic state of affairs that it is in now?
This is the CBS Evening News with Scott Pelley reporting tonight from Washington.
Good evening. It was a striking thing today to hear the President of the United States say that he cannot guarantee the 27 million Social Security checks that are due to be mailed on August 3rd.
Why can't he guarantee you payments? After all, you have been paying into the trust fund, haven't you?
Can you tell the folks at home that no matter what happens, the Social Security checks are going to go out on August the 3rd? There are about $20 billion worth of Social Security checks that have to go out the day after the government is supposedly going to go into default.
Well, this is not just a matter of Social Security checks. These are veterans checks. These are folks on disability and their checks. There are about 70 million checks that go out.
Can you guarantee as president those checks will go out on August the 3rd?
I cannot guarantee that those checks go out on August 3rd if we haven't resolved this issue, because there may simply not be the money in the coffers to do it.
So there is no money in the coffers to pay your Social Security payments. The only way to pay you is to increase the debt ceiling, borrow the money, and pay you with funds that you thought were funds coming from a trust fund. How bad is Social Security right now?
We're spending about $10 billion a day. Of the $10 billion a day we're spending, we're borrowing about $4 billion. Over here's what we bring in Social Security taxes, your payroll taxes, your FICA taxes. Here's what we spend to Social Security recipients. This is what we bring in. This is what we spend. We are now, for the first time, spending more than we take in.
And think about this. About 10,000 senior citizens a day are entering the Social Security system. By the way, they are entering the Medicare system as well.
How do you fix Social Security? Here's what happens if you do nothing. Look at the red ink. It piles on. This year alone, $37 billion we'll have to borrow to pay for Social Security. It goes up to over $100 billion within a decade. The truth of the matter is, we have to wake up and say our entitlements are unsound. Nobody wants to hear that, and people say you can't be elected by saying that. Well, guess what? It's the truth, and if we do not speak the truth to our problems, we will eventually and ultimately encounter a crisis in our country, and I'm for averting that crisis.
And I'm for averting that crisis as well. I know many people who are on Social Security, including many neighbors, friends, and my parents. And I also see many senior citizens in my line of work as an emergency room physician every day. And I can tell you that the number one concern for these seniors is whether the Medicare system and the Social Security system will be there for them, let alone their children and grandchildren. But there is only one candidate who is serious about saving Social Security for those already in the system, and that is Ron Paul. He's the only one from both major parties who is tackling the problem of saving those in the Social Security system by cutting spending elsewhere. You can't simply print the money like we've been doing, because if you do, this is what happens to the currency. The only way to save the entitlements for those in the system is to cut unnecessary spending. And there is no more unnecessary spending than that spending on our foreign policy.
I want to protect Social Security beneficiaries, but you have to cut these other things. We've made a promise. I'd like to make an effort to keep up the contract we have with the Social Security beneficiaries and keep that going. But we'd have to have a consensus on cutting spending in order to preserve these programs until we work our way out of it. But you also have to cut here at home. And my proposal cuts 5 of the departments, 5 major departments. We just don't need all these departments. And people get, worried about, but we've had them all this time. Yeah, but not all that long. So I want to cut spending. I think the easiest place to cut spending is overseas. Cut the foreign aid, the foreign operations, the military operations. It's time to come home. We went into Korea when I was in high school. We're still there, spending billions and billions of dollars. All that money we spend on our military personnel, I'd like to bring them home as quickly as possible. Get them to start spending their money here at home and work away from this transition. But we have to change our idea about the foreign policy.
Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you where some of your Social Security payments have been spent on. They're being spent on this. Each missile costs approximately $1.1 million. If you take the average monthly Social Security check of $1,100 per month, each missile used in the Libyan war could provide someone with over 83 years of Social Security payments. Think about it. The cost of each missile is 83 years of Social Security payments. And I wonder how much more the war will really cost in terms of the blowback now that the United States has enabled Al-Qaeda to establish a foothold with their brazen flying of the Al-Qaeda flag. How many terrorists will now come out of Libya to attack us for bombing them? And what will be the impact of that threat on the future of Social Security? Yes, Gaddafi was a bad man, but he posed no immediate threat to you or me. Yet Social Security payments are being gobbled up by the military-industrial complex, a complex that Eisenhower warned us about. This is bad policy as well as unconstitutional, wrong, and immoral. And some politicians even have the gall to tell you that you need to cut your payments to fund our wars that include the fact that we're dropping bombs on Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iraq, Libya, Yemen, Somalia, and possibly in Iran. The future of Social Security is inextricably linked to foreign policy, a policy that keeps us safe and secure rather than policing the world. but you can't have it both ways without printing the money.
Ron Paul, a visionary who predicted the financial crisis, a leader with a plan to solve it. The Paul Plan? Balance the budget. Cut $1 trillion year one. Eliminate 5 federal bureaucracies. End the foreign wars and nation building. Rein in the Federal Reserve. Pay down the debt. Cut taxes to create jobs. Ron Paul, a plan to restore America now.
I'm Ron Paul, and I approve this message.
Again, there is only one answer. Cut unnecessary spending.
Let's talk about your economic plan. You say that in your first year as president, you will cut $1 trillion in federal spending. How?
Of course, you have to get support. People have to know what you're doing. They have to know why they're doing it. The Congress has to give you support, but elected president, you'd have to have support of the people and support of the Congress to do it. But you could do a lot on overseas spending. That's where my number one attack is. Because of all the overseas spending in the last 10 years, our national debt went up $4 trillion. That's a big hunk. Going in Uganda and Libya and all these places without even congressional approval, that kind of stuff has to quit. Okay. If we don't, we're not going to solve our problem.
Okay, just I have to ask you one more question about this plan. The plan cuts out 5 cabinet departments and the TSA, but you don't mention anything about Social Security or Medicare. And those are the 2 big things that people are concerned about right now that's really busting our federal budget.
On the campaign, I've always said we have enough place to cut. We don't need to attack the elderly. We have made promises. That was a contract. Even though it's not the best program in the world, I would work real hard, and this is what my program does, cuts elsewhere in order to take care of the people who have become dependent. But I do deal with Social Security because I let the young people opt out, and that's a big deal. And but I think if we cut elsewhere, we don't have to put people out in the streets. So I have no regrets about cutting all this money overseas and protecting the people who are dependent, the Social Security beneficiaries.
Ron Paul, a veteran with a plan to keep America secure. Protect America by securing our borders and rebuilding our defenses, not by acting as the world's policemen, spending trillions nation-building overseas. The Paul Plan for Security? Start protecting America's borders. Stop wasting American money. Ron Paul, restore America now.
I'm Ron Paul, and I approve this message.
Ron Paul wants to get rid of the Department of Energy, which would save $27 billion a year to the American taxpayer. $27 billion could fund your Social Security for 2,045,445 years, assuming an average monthly Social Security check of $1,100 a month. Ron Paul also wants to get rid of the Department of Housing and Urban Development and return this function to the particular states. This would save taxpayers approximately $48 billion a year, which could also fund your Social Security payments for 3,636,363 years. He also voted against the war in Iraq, a war that will cost you, the taxpayer, over $4 trillion, a war that had nothing to do with the 9/11 terrorist attacks. This war could have funded your Social Security payments for 303,030,303 years. Ladies and gentlemen, this is where your Social Security payments have been spent, and this is why Social Security is in the sad state of affairs that it is, and the waste continues.
The true engine of economic growth will always be companies like Solyndra.
Wealthy donors with ties to Solyndra give Obama hundreds of thousands of dollars. What does Obama give them in return? $500 million in taxpayer money to help his friends. Now Solyndra's bankrupt, and taxpayers are stuck with the bill. What's worse? The Obama administration has just approved another $1 billion in loans to solar companies who also donated money to Democrats, risking billions of taxpayer dollars to help his political donors.
Solyndra's $535 million would have funded your Social Security for a mere 40,530 years. And $1 billion of guaranteed loans to the corrupt solar companies could have funded your Social Security payments for a mere 75,757 years. Ladies and gentlemen, you deserve better. You deserve Ron Paul. and don't be fooled by thinking that Obama's pulling the troops out of Iraq will save you money.
New this morning, the New York Times is reporting that the Obama administration plans to send more troops to the Persian Gulf in order to maintain a presence in that region after the United States withdraws from Iraq.
And don't be fooled by the other establishment Republicans. While they discuss their trivial matters, Ron Paul has his eye on the target, and that target is restoring America.
I mean, in the midst of a crisis, a sovereign debt worldwide crisis, the biggest in the history of the world, and the financial system of the world is about to collapse, we're about to have another devaluation of not our currency, but our credit rating. This is serious, and no control in the spending. I mean, we're going to have to get a handle on this. We have to quit worrying about who's mowing Mitt Romney's yard.
In 1960, the average American worker, many of whom are you who are currently on Social Security, earned an average yearly income of about $5,600. The major difference between then and now was not the amount of money that you earned, but the soundness of that income, because back then the dollar was still redeemable for an ounce of silver. So in reality, you earned 5,600 ounces of silver a year. If you stored $1 silver a day in your dresser drawer every day that you worked, you would have 365 ounces of silver after 1 year. But if you did this for 40 years, you would have 14,600 ounces of silver. If you consider that the price of silver today is about $30 an ounce, you would have had, with that 14,600 ounces of silver, about $438,000 in purchasing power, enough for about 30 years of Social Security. And that assumes an interest rate of 0% on your saved silver. That means that you would have saved about 33 years worth of Social Security payments just by saving a silver dollar a day based on your 1960 income, all without the aid of the federal government. If we restore the constitutionally mandated currency of gold and silver, there would be no need for Social Security, since younger people could use a currency that retains its value, thus providing a safety for the future with only a small savings plan. But you're being pillaged, ladies and gentlemen, in more ways than one. Many of you are making next to nothing on the interest payments of your CDs at the banks.
Seniors have also lost ground in the last 2 years because of extremely low interest rates. For Shirley Sinkowitz, a retiree from Georgia, it's been a double hit. No raise in Social Security and almost no return on savings.
We depend on the earnings from our investments, and that has been cut to almost nothing.
The increase for seniors by law will be paid for by a hike in payroll taxes, so there should be no hit to the deficit. But despite this raise, advocates for senior citizens remain angry about the years of no increases, saying the very way the cost of living gets calculated needs fundamental reform.
Well, Wyatt, to that point, gas prices and food prices were way up in 2010 and 2011. Why was there no increase then?
The reason why is because of one institution and one institution only, the Federal Reserve. Ben Bernanke and his cohorts are artificially keeping interest rates near zero in order to finance our debt-based government. This way they can print the money to bail out the banks with their billions in bonuses, while you get next to nothing in interest on your CDs and savings accounts. And only Ron Paul is connecting the dots with regard to reckless monetary policy at the Federal Reserve, reckless foreign policy in the White House, and reckless fiscal policy on Capitol Hill. In conclusion, the upcoming election is not about Obama versus the Republicans. It is about Ron Paul versus the establishment. Ron Paul is the only one with the courage to bring back the troops, protect the borders, cut spending, save Social Security, but allow the young people to opt out and restore the constitutional currency that they can use, thereby obviating the need for a Social Security system for the younger people. And he can restore the nation. He is the only one from both major parties that I will vote for. May I suggest that you do the same? Although some of you may find this offensive, and I wouldn't blame you if you do, you may need to join the Republican Party to vote for Ron Paul in the primaries. Only then do we have a chance of saving Social Security for those already in the system, as well as saving the Republic. Please go to bluerepublican.org, to learn what you can do to help Ron Paul become the Republican nominee in your state. Help to restore America now. Thanks.
"4 years ago, Ron Paul stood alone in predicting the impact on America of too much government, too much war, too much spending. Today, Ron Paul leads the pack as candidate after candidate recognizes reality.
Of course, Ron Paul was very happy tonight to have all the conversation about Bernanke and the Federal Reserve and the need to audit the Federal Reserve, which is an issue he's been pioneering for, I guess, 30 years now.
Congressman Paul was right on that.
I am on Ron Paul's bill to audit the Federal Reserve.
Running organizations like the TSA, I would agree with Representative Paul.
Congressman Paul, you're correct. You do exactly what Ron Paul said.
And Ron Paul does make a legitimate point.
Ron Paul, one message for 30 years.
We have allowed our nation to be overtaxed and overregulated and overrun by bureaucrats. The founders would be ashamed of us for what we're putting up with.
Ron Paul. Right then, right now, right for America.